Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Me and my co-worker run this small retail store together. We're both 20 and trying to make ends meet. We handle everything from customer service to inventory to closing up at night. Most days our routine was regular customers, simple transactions, and the occasional difficult person. But nothing prepared me for what happened last Tuesday. It started like any other afternoon. My co-worker was behind the counter organizing paperwork when this guy walked in. He looked to be in his 50s, average build, but something about his energy felt off. Instead of a normal greeting, the very first words out of his mouth were directed at my co-worker. He told her to screw herself in the most hostile way possible. My co-worker froze. She looked shocked and confused. I was stocking shelves nearby and walked over. I told him there was no need for that kind of language and asked what we could help him with. He responded sarcastically, asking if I was going to lecture him too. I said I wasn't lecturing anyone, but we wouldn't be able to help him if he was going to swear at my co-worker for no reason. He laughed at this, like the idea of basic respect was hilarious to him. He mocked me, asking if I was 12 years old and couldn't handle adult language. I ignored his mocking tone and focused on trying to help him. He explained his issue, which was actually something simple we could fix. I gave him the solution and figured that would be it. Most people would thank us and leave at that point, but this guy didn't leave. I watched him walk outside to his truck. Through our front window, I could see him checking his back seat over and over again. He'd lean in, look around, then check again. It was weird behavior, but I tried not to think too much about it. After about 15 to 20 minutes, he came back inside. This time he didn't say anything. He just sat down in one of the chairs we have near the entrance and stared at me. Not browsing, not asking questions, just sitting there glaring. My co-worker was helping another customer at this point, an older woman who'd come in looking for some supplies. I asked him if there was something else he needed help with. He told me he'd tell me only when the other customer left. I said he could tell me now since there was nothing private about retail questions. He insisted he would leave when the other customer left. The way he said it was creepy and determined. I felt my stomach drop a little. I told him I'd been nothing but pleasant with him his entire time being there while he'd been hostile. I gave him two options. He could either talk to me right then so I could try to help him, or he could leave because sitting there saying nothing was loitering. That set him off. He stood up fast and got right in my face, trying to intimidate me. His expression was pure hatred, like I personally ruined his entire life by asking him to either speak up or leave. I'm not an intimidating person, but I wasn't about to back down from this guy. I stared right back at him and asked what it was going to be. For a moment, we just stood there in this tense stare down. Then he looked away and mumbled that he'd leave. He walked toward the door, but instead of actually leaving, he went straight to his truck and sat in the front seat. He positioned himself so he could see directly through our front window, watching us, waiting. I pointed out to my co-worker that the guy was still there, just sitting in his truck staring at us. My co-worker looked nervous, and the older customer turned to see what we were talking about. The older woman told me I needed to call the police right away. She said that man wasn't right in the head, and this wasn't normal behavior. I wasn't sure if I should call the cops just because someone was sitting in their truck. But she insisted, telling me she'd seen this kind of thing before. She said he was waiting for her to leave so he could come back in and do something to us. She urged me to call them immediately. Her urgency convinced me. I dialed the police while keeping an eye on the guy outside. He was still doing that weird thing where he kept checking his back seat, turning around to look at something back there over and over again. The police arrived pretty quickly. Two officers got out of their patrol car and came inside first to talk to me. They said they'd gotten a call about someone loitering and making us uncomfortable. I confirmed that the man in the truck had been hostile inside the store, said he'd leave, but then just sat out there staring at us through the window for the past 20 minutes. The officer told me they'd go talk to him and that we should stay inside. They went outside and approached his truck. I watched through the window as they talked to him. At first, it seemed like a normal conversation, but then suddenly The guy started getting agitated. He was waving his arms around and seemed to be yelling at the officers. Then things escalated fast. The man actually tried to fight the police officers. I couldn't hear everything, but I could see him taking swings at them. More backup arrived, and they ended up arresting him right there in our parking lot. About 20 minutes later, one of the original officers came back inside. He told me the man was going to jail that night because there was something in the back seat of his truck that he was going to jail for. He said the guy was actually a wanted man. The officer asked if we were okay and offered to have someone stay if we didn't feel safe. I told him we were fine and asked what was in the truck. He said he couldn't give me details, but I'd made the right call because this guy was bad news. He had me write up a witness report about everything that happened. After the officer left, my co-worker and I just looked at each other. She said she couldn't believe that had happened and wondered what was in his truck. I told her I had no idea, but I was glad that customer had convinced us to call the police. The rest of our shift was pretty quiet after that, but I kept thinking about how the whole thing started with him just walking in and being needlessly hostile to my co-worker. If he was already a wanted man with something illegal in his truck, why would he draw attention to himself by being horrible to random retail workers? It made no sense. I found out later from the local news that he'd been wanted for several serious charges in another state. Whatever was in that back seat was apparently enough to add more time to his sentence. The thought that he'd been sitting out there in his truck, staring at us and checking on whatever illegal thing he had back there still gives me chills. I've been a nurse for about 8 years now, working for a mid-sized healthcare company. Back in 2013, I was 32 years old, single, and pretty focused on my career. I preferred to keep my head down and do good work rather than chase the spotlight. That year, something unusual happened at work. For 2 whole years, our nursing team had been working on a research paper about patient training and education. It was a collaborative effort involving about 15 nurses from different departments. We'd spend countless hours after shifts and weekends gathering data, interviewing patients, and analyzing results. The paper was really something we were all proud of. When it came time to present our findings at the annual Nursing Council convention, everyone looked at me. I'm not sure why exactly. Maybe because I was one of the few male nurses in the group, or maybe because I'd done most of the data analysis work. Either way, I got stuck with the presentation duty while everyone else got to enjoy the convention as regular attendees. The convention was being held in one of those beautiful coastal cities that tourists flock to. It's the kind of place where hotel prices triple during tourist season, which starts in April. Since the convention was in mid-May, everything was expensive. The event itself was at this gorgeous 5-star hotel right on the waterfront, but there was no way I could afford to stay there. Instead, I booked a room at a decent but much cheaper hotel about 10 minutes away. We're talking about saving 100 euros per night, which was significant on a nurse's salary. The morning of my presentation, I put on my best dark blue business suit and tie. I'm a pretty big guy at 6'4" and 225 pounds, so I have to buy suits carefully to make sure they fit right. I grabbed my laptop bag and headed to the fancy hotel. The presentation went really well. Our research had some solid findings about how proper patient education could reduce readmission rates and improve overall health outcomes. I could see people in the audience taking notes and nodding along. When I finished, several attendees came up to ask questions and compliment the work. I felt proud not just for myself, but for the whole team back home. After the presentation, I ran into an old classmate from nursing school. We hadn't seen each other in a couple of years, so we decided to catch up over coffee. She wanted to attend another presentation later that afternoon, so we agreed to stay at the hotel and head to the Patio Cafe instead of going somewhere else. The patio was this beautiful outdoor area overlooking the water. It was packed with people from the convention, mostly student nurses and other attendees enjoying the sunshine and taking a break between sessions. The cafe staff was clearly swamped, trying to serve everyone. We found a small table and ordered our coffee. It was nice just sitting there talking about our careers, mutual friends, and how much the profession had changed since we graduated. The sun was warm, the coffee was good, and I was feeling pretty relaxed after the stress of the presentation. My friend excused herself to visit the bathroom, so I pulled out my phone to check messages. That's when I felt someone standing right behind me, casting a shadow over my table. A woman with a high-pitched voice demanded my attention. I turned around to see someone who looked like she'd stepped out of a stereotypical, entitled customer handbook. She had that short, layered haircut that screams trouble. Her clothes were expensive but somehow managed to look cheap at the same time. Her face was already twisted into an annoyed expression. I asked if I could help her with something. She told me angrily that she and her friends had been waiting for someone to take their order for 5 whole minutes. She pointed aggressively toward a table about 20 feet away where 2 other women were sitting. They looked just as irritated as she did. I responded with confusion, asking what that had to do with me. She demanded that I get off my break and come take their order immediately. I tried to explain that I didn't work for the hotel and that she needed to wait for one of the actual servers, but she cut me off before I could finish. She called me a peon and said that paying customers deserved service. She screamed that my break was over. Before I could even respond, she swept her arms across my table like she was clearing it. Both coffee cups went flying along with the glasses of water. Coffee and water splashed all over me, soaking through my suit jacket and shirt. The part that made me furious was that my laptop bag was sitting on the chair next to me and the zipper was slightly open. All that liquid poured directly into the bag and onto my laptop. I stood up immediately, and that's when the size difference became very obvious. Even in her high heels, she barely came up to my chest. But I wasn't trying to intimidate her, I was just furious about what she'd done. I told her that I didn't work there, and that even if I did, I wouldn't serve someone with her terrible attitude. I also made it clear that if my laptop was damaged, she would be paying for it. She acted shocked that I would dare threaten someone like her. She demanded to know if I understood who she was dealing with. I told her I didn't know and didn't care who she thought she was. I called her an entitled witch, which made her even angrier. By this point, pretty much everyone on the patio was staring at us. I could see people at nearby tables pulling out their phones, probably recording the whole thing. One of the actual servers was walking over quickly, looking concerned. That's when Karen decided to escalate things even further. She pulled her hand back and tried to slap me across the face. I caught her wrist easily before she could make contact. The server asked what was happening. The server was dressed in the actual uniform: black pants, white shirt, and black apron. It should have been obvious to anyone that I wasn't dressed like the staff. Karen immediately complained that her colleague was refusing to take their order and was threatening her. She acted like she was the victim in the whole situation. The server looked at me and politely explained to Karen that I was a customer, not an employee. You'd think that would be the end of it, but Karen's brain apparently couldn't process this information. She started getting even more worked up, her voice getting shriller and shriller. Within a few minutes, a manager appeared, followed by hotel security. The manager asked what the problem was. I explained that this woman had insulted me, deliberately spilled coffee on me and my belongings, and had tried to physically attack me. I told him I wanted to press charges. The mention of police involvement sent Karen into another rant. She started screaming about discrimination against foreign tourists and how she was going to sue me and the hotel. She kept going on about how we should respect our betters and how this was unacceptable treatment for someone of her status. The manager tried to calm everyone down, but Karen was beyond reason at this point. Security had to physically escort her out of the hotel. I never saw what happened to her friends, but I assumed they either left with her or pretended they didn't know her. My laptop was completely ruined. When I opened it later, coffee had gotten into all the internal components. The screen was dead, the keyboard was sticky, and it wouldn't even turn on. That laptop had all my work files, personal photos, and the research data from our presentation. The hotel manager was incredibly apologetic about the whole situation. He offered me a full-paid weekend reservation at the hotel for any time I wanted to use it. It was a generous gesture, especially since the incident wasn't really the hotel's fault. I did end up pressing charges. The whole thing was witnessed by dozens of people, and several of them had recorded parts of it on their phones. It took about a year to work through the legal system, but eventually I received a settlement of 3,500 euros. That was enough to replace my laptop, compensate me for the ruined suit, and still have money left over. Karen had been banned from that entire hotel chain. Apparently, this wasn't her first incident of treating service workers badly. The hotel took customer complaints seriously, especially when they involved assault and destruction of property. My friend came back from the bathroom right after security was escorting Karen out. She couldn't believe what she'd missed in just 5 minutes. We ended up having to find somewhere else to finish our conversation since I was soaked in coffee and needed to change clothes. Karen never once apologized or seemed to understand that she'd made a mistake. Even when multiple people told her I didn't work there, she kept insisting that I was somehow obligated to serve her. Our company needed to move one of our remote offices to a new building. My boss asked me to check out the new place and figure out where to put all the network ports. When I got there to do the walkthrough, I found out the landlord refused to install any low-voltage wiring. He basically said it wasn't his problem. We got quotes from contractors, but they wanted thousands of dollars just for the wiring work. My boss looked at me and said we couldn't afford that right now. So guess what? Yours truly got to make an 8-hour drive with 4 boxes of cable in my car to wire the whole building myself. About 30 network drops in a building that was already finished. Fun times. Day 1 arrives and I drive up with our facilities manager. We walk into the building Monday morning, first day of the month, ready to get this done. It's actually pretty nice outside, cooler than back home, so at first nobody notices anything wrong. But after about an hour, things start getting warm inside. And I mean warm. By noon, it's 80 degrees in there. By 3 in the afternoon, it's 85. The rooms with those big floor-to-ceiling windows are like greenhouses. I'm up in the ceiling trying to run cable through insulation, sweating like crazy, and getting itchy from all the fiberglass. The workers still finishing up the building told us they had reported the broken air conditioning to the leasing company 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks! And get this, there are still construction workers on site. The building isn't even finished, but they want us to move in and start paying rent. Day 2 is even worse. When we walk in that morning, it's already 80 degrees inside. The facilities manager is losing his mind, calling people and yelling at them to fix the air conditioning. By 3 in the afternoon, we're all exhausted from the heat. I'm up in the ceiling again when I move a tile and find a 4-foot hole in the duct work. No wonder there's no cold air coming out. The whole system is just blowing hot air around. When we ask about it, they tell us the compressor is broken. Day 3, more of the same misery. I'm finally getting close to finishing all the network wiring when the air conditioning repair guys show up around 10 in the morning. They work for about 4 hours and tell us it's fixed. We ask them what they did to fix it, and they give us some vague answer about doing a lot of things. When we push for specifics, they tell us they can't reveal what they did to the tenants. Red flag alert. Who says that? Our real estate agent said she'd look into it. Later that night, she emails us saying they changed the refrigerant from something called R22 to R410A. I know a little about air conditioning systems, so I told the facilities manager there's no way that's what they actually did. I explained that it would be like putting gasoline in a diesel engine, and they'd have to replace the entire system to do that properly. They didn't do that in 4 hours. What they really did was duct tape and spray some penetrating oil on everything to make it work temporarily. It might run for a month, maybe 2, then completely die. And guess who'd be stuck paying for a replacement? US at day 4 and we're done with this nonsense. Still no running water in some areas, construction workers everywhere, and the air conditioning can't keep up when the sun hits those big windows. It still gets to 80 degrees by the end of the day, and the system runs continuously. We start packing up everything we moved in because we're getting out of there. That's when I noticed something really bad. All the fire sprinklers look different. The metal protection around the ceiling tiles has fallen to the floor in some places. Some sprinklers aren't even sticking through the tiles anymore, and others are hanging way lower than they should be. I realize what happened. Those air conditioning repair guys stood on the fire sprinklers to reach their ductwork. They damaged the entire fire safety system in the building. We contact the landlord and try to be reasonable about it. The facilities manager explains that they haven't delivered a finished building like they promised, and we want to move out and consider the lease broken. But this guy has a 36-page lease agreement, and he's not letting us out of anything. It's a 5-year lease, and he wants every penny. He tells us that we signed the contract and we're responsible for the full term regardless of any issues with the building. Our corporate lawyer and the real estate agent both tell us we're probably stuck. We're desperate to find any way out of this mess. That's when I remember my background running low-voltage wiring for fire and security systems. I start looking around more carefully at the fire safety equipment. There's no fire alarm panel anywhere in our section of the building. None of the smoke detectors are connected to anything. They're just sitting there, doing nothing. One of our guys moving equipment mentions something that makes my day. He tells me he never saw any building permits posted anywhere in this place. Bingo. They did this entire renovation, including tearing down walls, running new plumbing and electrical, and destroying the fire system, all without getting proper city permits. Time to call the city inspector's office. Day 5 I'm back home, but the facilities manager stays to deal with everything. Here's what he told me. Happened when I called him later. The city inspector came out and pulled all the permit records. There weren't any permits at all. He found multiple violations of city building codes and red-tagged our entire section. When the facilities manager told him to check the fire system like I suggested, the inspector just shook his head and said he had to make a phone call. He called the fire marshal. 3 days later, the fire marshals show up. They find no working alarm system in our part of the building. Red tag. Then they discover that the main water line for the fire sprinklers in the entire building runs through our section. No water pressure in the system at all. They condemned the entire building. So let me get this straight. This entitled landlord wouldn't let us out of our lease, even though he never delivered a working building. He thought he could force us to pay rent for 5 years in a place with no air conditioning, no running water, and no fire safety systems. But when the city building inspector got involved, everything fell apart for him. When the fire marshal condemned the entire building, suddenly his 36-page lease didn't matter anymore. They've already refunded our deposit and the rent we paid, but our lawyer says we're going after them for all the time and money we wasted. All the hours moving equipment in and out, all the network wiring I installed, all the travel expenses. Our lawyer is practically rubbing his hands together with glee. He tells us they don't have a leg to stand on, and he's happy for them to pay his legal fees too when we're done with them. They're still trying to fight us over it. This landlord is so entitled he thinks he can get away with renting out a condemned building and keeping our money. But now he's looking at paying not just our refund, but all our expenses and legal fees too. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.